Welcome to Passion Inspires. Join us as we explore the world of marketing and design and share insights and stories that spark inspiration and drive meaningful change. Yesterday, my team asked me to talk about a topic of how did this all start? And I'm going to go a little bit further than what they asked me to do, and I'm going to go all the way back. My father was a carpenter, and a few years ago, he explained the story to me that he was building a home with a hope that his family of 5 children could move into that home, but because of their finances were so tight and close, it took him 5 homes before he could finally stay in that home and they could settle in and live there, through all the time that I was growing up as a kid. My parents had 5 children, and my mom almost died when my older sister was born. The doctor said to her, "Norma, you shouldn't have any more children." And my parents were people of faith, and I don't know if I would have do what they did, but they decided to trust the Lord and have more children. And a few years later, I was born. A few years after that, my brother Doug was born. So we were number 6 and 7 out of a family of 7 kids. We were the spoiled ones, obviously. We lived on the edge of the playground of our elementary school, and then next to that, adjacent to that, was our church. So our whole world was within 1 block. And I remember my first day of kindergarten, my mom grabbed my hand, and she walked me over to the school and took the final turn where I saw all these kids waiting in line. Well, I just started bawling like a baby because I was so terrified. I was so shy, I didn't know what to do with all these people in my life all of a sudden. But I remember even in kindergarten how I loved to draw with crayons, and a teacher would tell us a story and say, "Oh, draw a picture." Well, I drew these elaborate drawings. Even in kindergarten, I began to discover how much I loved drawing. On Sundays, our family would go over to my grandpa's house, and he loved birds, and he had this beautiful book on the Encyclopedia of Birds. And he also had this whole library, years and years of National Geographics. So when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I said, "Grandpa, can I take one of those home with me?" And he allowed me to take one magazine at a time. When I saw a photo that I really loved, like a photo of a bird or an animal or a person in the jungle or something like that, I would just draw it. And I spent hours doing that. And then finally got my own little Encyclopedia of Birds book and would draw almost every page of those birds, the beautiful hawks and eagles and bluebirds and robins. And why would I find such joy in taking a picture and then redrawing that picture? I couldn't explain it, but it was something that was filled with passion and joy. I was about 10 or 11 years old. My dad, who, like I shared, was in construction, he saw his young son enjoy art. And so on a Saturday morning, he said, "Jeff, jump in the car." Well, we lived in Wyoming, which is just adjacent to Grand Rapids. But for me to drive from Wyoming all the way into downtown Grand Rapids, go through all these different neighborhoods, factory buildings across the Grand River, finally to the store in downtown, was a long trip for me. When we got out of the car, he put his hand on my shoulder. We walked into the store. He opened the door, and in front of me was this wonderland of art supplies. And I'll never forget when my dad shared with me, "Jeff, buy whatever you want." I thought, what? Buy whatever I want? My parents don't have any money. Once a year, they would take us to buy new shoes and clothes for school in the fall, but they didn't have any extra money. We had oatmeal for breakfast, and every penny was accounted for, but he said, "Buy whatever you want." And so as I walked through the different aisles, I saw these how to draw books, how to draw animals, how to paint seascapes, and I bought 3 or 4 of those books. So I bought watercolor paints and pastels, and took those books, and every page of each of those books I would either paint that seascape or do that drawing of that horse or the drawing of the lion or the cheetah. And I just consumed those books until I really found that I enjoyed painting. by ninth grade, I was already selling commissions for people that wanted a painting of their cottage or a painting of their boyfriend. In high school, one of my funnest commissions was for this roller derby contest for this men's ministry. They wanted literally a 30-foot wide and 10-foot high poster of all these different panels of these race cars. And I remember doing that, and it was just so much fun. By the time I was graduating from high school, I really wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life. My best friends were going off to be an aeronautical engineer or in tool and die or in accounting. And even though I loved art, I just didn't know where to go. And I remember sitting in the library as a senior, and my librarian said to me, "Jeff, what are you going to do after high school?" I said, "You know what? I really don't know. I'm probably going to go to Grand Rapids Community College just to get started, but I'm not sure what to do." And he said, "Jeff, have you ever heard about Kendall?" I said, "No, I hadn't." And he said, "Well, they're one of the top 10 art schools in the country, and it's kind of a prestigious school. You have to submit a portfolio of 10 pieces, and they don't really accept everyone. You have to be really good, but you should apply at Kendall." And that was just a godsend for me, because by the time I had applied and was accepted at Kendall and went for my foundation year, it was one of the best years of my life. All the different classes that I had, I just could not get enough. I had these amazing professors: Sandy Ringlever, Stephen Duran, Ralph Allord. Each one of them taught me so much about the discipline that I had in their class. Ralph Allord taught me about design and life drawing, and Stephen Duran taught me how to draw and just go after a drawing with all your heart and don't hold back, and draw with contrast and all these things that as an artist you just aren't taught, and all of a sudden you are being taught how to create beautiful, powerful art. And Sandy Ringlever through the years taught me the love for designing logos, and art history class I could not get enough of. Every class meant so much to me. And after graduating from Kendall, I felt like I had received so much. I had been given so much, and that I was a steward of what I was given. And so that senior year, I had arranged to become a volunteer for Wycliffe Bible Translators and go as an artist to Ivory Coast, West Africa for 6 months as a volunteer. Well, besides my brother flying a plane around above Holland in Lake Michigan, I had never flown before. And flying out on my own, stopping in New York, and then flying to Ivory Coast after that was like this whole world of experience that I had never seen. Being in Africa, as for those who have been in Africa, all the sights and smells and a number of people in a marketplace, and everything can almost be really overwhelming. And when you get off the plane, you're greeted by armed guards with automatic weapons, and you just see all these different sights and sounds that were never part of my experience here growing up in Michigan. I just wanted to be with the African people, so every day I would go to the market and have fish and all the different kinds of food that you would have in a local African market. And the other staff warned me, "Jeff, you should not be doing that. That is not safe." But I kept doing it month after month, and finally in the third or fourth month, I got deathly sick. I got food poisoning and was literally in bed for 3 days feeling like I was going to die. And it's like, oh my gosh, I think they were right. But to me, it was still worth it, having developed friendships with those precious people. It wouldn't have been if I died, but hey, I made it. So one of my highlights of those 6 months was when my boss told me, "Jeff, we want you to travel throughout Ivory Coast and visit different people groups, different language groups, where our teams are learning the language and developing primers, so that that language group could learn their own language and learn more of their traditions." And but they need illustrations for these primers. This is way before computers. Well, computers were just starting to be on the scene. So they wanted drawings of each of these language groups because obviously each language group has their own way of life. One language group in the rainforest would depend on rice. Another one in savanna would depend on millet. And, all these different nuances of unique characteristics of each culture, how they work, how they live, what their homes look like. And so each of them needed their own drawings. I think it's the Kalahari River that separates Liberia from Ivory Coast. And we took canoes to the other side of the river, and as we got out, we saw this gentleman. I'll never forget the big smile on his face. He was sitting there by a fire, and on top of the fire, there were 3 rats laid open that he had caught, and that was going to be part of his meals for the next few days. And to have meat in that culture at all was a real treat. But I think my real highlight for me was when one of the staff asked me to go to do drawings out in the village that day, and I was drawing all day long, drawing women pounding futu and drawing the chickens that were around their huts, and just trying to get as many drawings in as I could that day that they could use later on. And as we were walking back to the home where I was staying, the staff person said, "Jeff, we're going to be stopping by the chief's home on the way back. I want you to show him your book, what you've been drawing, so that he can understand why you're here. And I'll do all the translation." And I said to him, "Well, you got to tell me how to interact with the chief. I don't want to have a misstep here and not honor him in the way that he should be honored, and just guide me, please." And he said, "Okay, no problem, I'll guide you." So we got to the chief's home, and he had this real stately, large chair, and he had this beautiful dress. Oh man, his outfit was amazing. And he just looked stately as a chief. He looked like a chief. The staff person showed him my drawing book. He started paging through the drawings, and he said, "Can you do a drawing of me?" So the translator tells me what he asked, and I said, "Yeah, I'll do a drawing of you." But I'm not sure what they do to artists who don't do a good job in this culture. Do they burn you at the stake? I don't know. I just I was kind of terrified, man, if he does not like this drawing, this is not good. So I asked him if he could please sit still, so he was sitting on his chair, and just, again, he looked so regal. When I got the drawing done, after about an hour, I handed the drawing to him, and I'll never forget that moment when I saw his joy and the smile on his face. And it's amazing, because sometimes in our life, there's these little moments that really aren't a huge moment, but yet they're profound in directing our life. And I felt like that was one of my moments, because I had struggled all through college about what is the purpose of art? How can I use art for others? Should I use it for self-expression? And a lot of artists are just kind of wrestling with, what am I going to do with the art? Is it going to be for me? Is it going to be for others? And I had a lot of beautiful fine artist friends in college, and some of them became incredibly successful later on. But that moment when the chief saw his image and I saw the joy in his life, there was this voice in my heart saying, "Jeff, art can be to bring joy to others. You can be used to bring joy to others through your gift." And that was that aha moment for me as I was flying back a couple months after that event, coming back home. That really kind of became my guiding star for my life. So that's the story that I have to share with you, and I hope you enjoyed it. Well, thank you so much for listening to my personal journey. I would like the second half of this podcast to be about how Scott Allen Creative all began. sometimes I hesitate to share years with people because I feel so ancient. When I have staff who are 25, 30 years old and I talk about the 90s, it's like, that's in the 1900s, right? So yes, it's in the 1900s. In 1992, I got a job as a creative director primarily because I needed to learn the computers, because at that time they were just coming on the scene with desktop publishing, and I didn't know anything about computers, and the best way I could learn was to get a job and learn. And so I worked for a nonprofit for 5 years as a creative director, helped guide them through 2 branding campaigns, 2 capital campaigns, and that was a real joy to me. It was like a dream job. But my family was growing, and I wanted to help my wife with homeschooling and just be there by her side throughout the day. And so that worked out really well in the very beginning. But I also wanted to help teach artists of different families that we knew within our homeschool community, because I had struggled so much as a young artist trying to figure out how can I use my art, how can I use my art for the glory of God, how can I use my art for others? And as a young person, I struggled with that all through high school and didn't discover that purpose until I went to Africa, as I shared on the other episode. And so I found great joy in just inviting any family that had someone in their family that wanted to learn about art, whether they were just in 8th grade, just beginning to draw, or in high school and wanted to learn how to paint. At whatever level they were at, we would take them in and for a couple hours teach them how to draw or how to paint, how to look at art and how to design. One of those people was 16-year-old Ben Braidaway. And when Ben came in, I think I spent about 6 months teaching him how to paint. And then he saw what I was doing in my home studio and the design work I did for my clients. And he said, "Jeff, I'd like to learn more about that." So one day became 2 days, then 3 days, and eventually as our work grew, I could have Ben join us full-time as my first employee. We actually had some really great clients. One of our clients was Ostram. And Ostram, they design home and garden products like garden baskets and hanging baskets and things like that. And they were a market leader in that space. They're a national company. They sold to Lowe's and Home Depot, and also all the smaller kind of flower shops throughout the country, like Flowerland here locally. And they would design new baskets and new designs, and then the next year at the trade shows, you would see everyone else following their designs. And so they were a market leader, and they were a national client. They were out of Kentucky. At one point, they said to us, "We love the design work and photography work that you do for us, but we really need a marketing partner." And it was amazing because right at that time, a longtime designer friend of mine, Jim Cusdell, he stopped by our office randomly out of nowhere and had his book in his hand, Ogilvy on Advertising. I said, "Thanks, Jim. That's amazing that you thought of us." He said, "Yeah, I just thought you'd enjoy this book. It has a lot on marketing," and he had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. But when I read that book, David Ogilvy opened up my heart and mind to the idea that if you create any design for a client, if you write a headline, if you create a video, build a website, create social media content, whatever your job is for your client, do your research first. And I love the way David Ogilvy in that one chapter describes that you need to research the product that you're selling or what the mission of the organization is. You research that out really well and learn all the attributes of that product, how it's different than the competition, what other people might buy, or if they're a mission organization, how the way they provide services is different than another nonprofit, and just really understand that deeply. And then he said you must also understand all your audiences. Obviously, if you're selling a product, you need to understand the consumer and the buyer and what they're looking for, what attributes they desire when they buy that product. What's the brand personality that you're trying to convey with that product? And so you understand the product, you understand the consumer, you understand market trends, you get to know the competition so that you don't look like the competition. And all of a sudden, this whole world of research was opened up to us. And we began becoming a marketing partner to Ostram. Ben learned how to produce videos and websites, and my son Jonathan, I hired him to be my first videographer. He was so passionate about videography because I had brought him as a 10-year-old to Saving Private Ryan. This amazing movie that Steven Spielberg directed that literally changed the trajectory of Jonathan's life. From the time he was sitting in that theater and saw that movie, he wanted to be involved with film. So Jonathan became our first videographer. And Ben and I began to start thinking like marketers, not just designers who can create beautiful brands, but marketers who could be intelligent enough to know how to help our clients position themselves in the marketplace and market their products. A couple other clients came along that helped us in that formation. We began working with the Links Golf Course, and they had golfers who would come to their course from the Western Michigan region and from Chicago. And so they gave us their whole media budget. At that time, this is, around 2007, maybe 2006. So it was much before a lot of the social media was part of the marketing mix. And so their marketing mix was print advertising and magazines, billboards, radio, and TV spots. So we came alongside them and we helped them craft a media plan and know where to place the billboards, what those billboards should say. And they had this beautiful brand of this lynx cat. I'll never forget seeing their billboards on 131 and just being so proud of those billboards with this beautiful lynx cat, the Links Golf Course, on these billboards. And we marketed to magazines and publications in Chicago. And even during this kind of a recession period of time, they prospered and they did really well. And it just got us so excited about becoming that marketing partner that our clients needed. Another example of the insights that we gained was when Ben learned about this nonprofit in Tibet. And besides David Ogilvy, we also read about Mary Wells Lawrence. She had a book where it wasn't just about research for Mary Wells Lawrence, it was about passion. So if she was marketing a car, she wanted to ride in that car, feel the wind in her face, and just feel it with her soul and heart. And so we began looking at our clients through the lens of intellectual research and passion. They need to come together, and then you can become the best marketing partner possible. Those two things combined. So beyond that as well, Ben bought this really thick red cover book, and I think it might have been like a college book on marketing, and it was so thorough on how you evaluate the positioning of your product and who your audiences are and how to find them and how to reach them. And it gave you deep understanding into this whole marketing idea. And when Ben was flying to Tibet to meet with his client, he read through that book. Well, what he discovered was that Khaden Rugs was an organization that was started as an outreach to the Tibetans so that they could sell their wool, create rugs, and then sell them throughout the whole, Southeast Asian market. So they were trying to sell to hotels, these high-end hotels, all throughout Eurasia and the whole region there. But they were struggling. And so as a new marketer, Ben began thinking about, let's start with a product. And he discovered that their product design had all these different colors on every rug. And so he designed a whole new line of rugs that were monochromatic. Each rug needed to be within one monochromatic color scheme because that's what people were looking for. Well, he discovered that through research. And so they created all this new rug line, and then Ben gave them a new logo and brand identity, a new website, and they just took off. They began selling to these high-end hotels, and it was just a beautiful success story to help this local people group sell what they could, the wool that they were creating. That was where we found a lot of joy in becoming more than just a design shop. And I just want to say a couple things about Ben Braidaway. Sometimes we have people in our life who really come alongside of us as not just an employee, but as a true emotional partner and intellectual partner. And Ben, even though I was teaching him art when he was 16 years old, and he stayed with Scott Allen Creative, I think it was about 15 years, he became our creative director. He moved to Spain, so I don't see him anymore, but I miss him like crazy. But he's always going to hold that special place in my heart. He was like family. And Ben taught me so much. You know, I wanted to be a mentor to Ben, but I felt like I was being mentored by Ben. I remember one time we were struggling with an important decision for Scott Allen Creative. He said, Jeff, step outside of yourself. I know you own Scott Allen Creative, but step outside of Jeff Terpstra and think of this decision for Scott Allen Creative as its own entity. And I never forgot that. That was so profound for me and how I can lead Scott Allen Creative in a more objective, thoughtful way. And Ben was a marketing genius, and he was a design genius. His designs were gorgeous. The logo designs were amazing, and the layout designs that he created. And he also wasn't afraid of learning anything. He learned how to build websites. He learned how to edit video with Jonathan. You know, after graduating from college, I thought I knew it all. And so I stopped reading, I stopped discovering, I stopped listening to books and things like that. And when Jim Cuslow came over to our office and handed me that book by David Ogilvy, he opened up the world of realizing I should be a lifelong learner. There is such joy in that, and there's such wisdom in that, because our clients deserve that. Our clients deserve someone or an agency or a partner who can be lifelong learners, that we're always learning new insight into social media or new insight into how to frame a shot or how to edit a video or how to write a headline and how to become a better writer, how to become a better designer. Just always learning and enjoying that process. And it feels like sometimes I can't read enough books. Because once you read a new book, like I'm reading a book now by Gary Vaynerchuk, and it just blows my mind how much he knows that I don't know. And I felt the same way when I read that book by Stein on writing. It's like there's a whole wealth of information and insight that I can learn. And I never forget reading a book by John Steele. He talked about the perfect pitch. And I learned so much from John about how to think as a big-time agency, even though we're a small shop in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But how to think like a big-time agency. Anyway, that's part of our culture here at Scott Allen Creative. We're a bunch of lifelong learners, and we're so grateful that we can use our skills for our clients that way.